Hello everyone, and thanks so much for all the support with my videos. I'm very grateful. Today I want to speak about what's been happening in Syria. There's been wall-to-wall coverage over the last number of days about the fall of Damascus and the Assad regime that's been in power there for well over 50 years, going back to Bashar al-Assad's father, who led the Arab nationalist dictatorship in Syria. Now it's fallen without much of a fight back from the Syrian army to the terror groups, all funded by Western proxies such as the United States, Turkey, and a number of other countries such as Israel, who will benefit from what's gone on in Syria over the past number of days. Now, there was reports that Assad's plane was shot down. Of course, this was quickly discounted as we've information that Assad has arrived in Moscow with his family. Now, also, what's very important around this is the context to what's been going on geopolitically and how it impacts us here domestically in Ireland as well. At the head of this terror regime, HCS they're called, is Jolani, and he was the ex-deputy head of Al-Qaeda in Iraq, ex-deputy head of ISIS in Syria also as well, who was second in command to their founder in Syria. And they've become more moderate, according to Joe Biden. ISIS and Al-Qaeda moderate? I don't think so. So this is a sort of narrative that's being pushed by the collective West as well. Now he's also known as Al-Shan currently. Now this was previously because he was on the most wanted terror list. There was a $10 million reward, I think, for Jolani for a few number of years. And of course, as I said, they've been funded by the US and their proxies as well. We already know that the US have a third of Syria in terms of the population and the resources of that region as well. In terms of the oil-rich resources are controlled by up to 1,000 US troops that are in Syria. It's supposed to be a sovereign country, wasn't it? Well, obviously not. And they have had a decisive role in the destruction of the Syrian Arab Republic. Now, the big winners from this are quite clear to see. The big winners would be Netanyahu of Israel, who already said that he was looking to claim a decisive victory in a strike against Syria. But of course, what's happened in the last few days since the announced ceasefire in Hezbollah has provided cover for the Israelis to go for a big offensive around the Golan Heights, which have been occupied in a contested region since 1967. Now this is interesting because Israel now are going for a big land grab in the region in towards Syria, destroying so much of the Syrian military and supposed military facilities and their air force as well in that region, and that will have implications for destroying supply lines from Iran to Lebanon to fund Hezbollah. Now, of course, Netanyahu will be delighted with this because this will keep his regime in power and maybe play into the narrative of pursuing their land grab and conquest that's going to really, really speed up over the next number of days and months and possibly years, as we could see what breaks out from the destruction and chaos in Syria. Now, of course, the US will benefit from this as well because of the geopolitical dominance in the region, and it's really a battle towards the multipolar world in terms of the move away from the dollar, the move away from the drive of the US empire leading the way throughout the world. But it has been a victory for the United States in this regard. But again, it will create huge chaos going forward in that region, and most notably amongst the Syrian people who've suffered for years and years under various regimes, the authoritarian regime of Assad, and now with this absolutely just terrorist regime. That's what al-Jawani's regime is, as we all know about the horrors of ISIS and Al-Qaeda, despite what Biden tries to claim, and a lot of the international community will claim that they're moderate elements. Now the losers, as I said, would be the people of Syria, would be as well issues around Palestine, the resistance of those areas, and Iran in terms of isolation. And who knows, this has always been in train for many years, going back to the Bush regime, Obama and Trump. And then subsequently we've seen the victory today with the Biden regime, who was already looking for more war around the world. But this has always been the go-to mechanism worked by the United States to exert their dominance and control in various parts of the world. Now, it will create chaos in this region, which already has a lot of chaos currently. And also, so many of the economic issues have impacted the people of Syria. So many people are struggling, living in abject poverty, issues around the Syrian army not being supported, and corruption also, and lack of money to pay people in that country because of the sanctions and the resources in the region, and not to mention trade, with the implications for China and their Silk Road to access the Mediterranean, which is very important in terms of moving towards the multipolar world that we're currently in. And this is really what the battle and war is all about. And Ireland, again, in the position we're in, it's important to note where they're standing, because there's been so much of the media in Ireland has been celebrating this to claim that this is a victory for the people of Syria and freedom, which it couldn't be anything from the truth, because it just shows you how much the media are captured by the US in terms of the information that's been pushed out. And the narrative, again, has already permeated the political classes in Ireland, where Simon Harris was jumping up and down around this and said this was a great day to get rid of the Assad regime, but of course neglected to mention ISIS and Al-Qaeda. Of course he would, wouldn't he? Because he's just doing what his masters in Europe and the United States would tell him to do as well. Micheál Martin was no different, of course, pushing this, but this has been coming for a significant period of time, and it shows you really how much the dominance has been exerted in that region, and how they use nefarious forces to exert their power and dominance. And it is important in terms of the Irish context, because of so many of the Irish peacekeepers were there in Syria for well over 10 years, up to 130, 140 troops at a time. And they had to pull out of this operation back in April because they couldn't support it anymore. And we know how depleted the Irish Defence Forces are, how underfunded they are, how many people are leaving the Irish Defence Forces. And the narrative of pushing these so-called peacekeeping agendas should be fully investigated and audited to see what's actually happening in these countries and who are we supporting. Because it's important what happened in Golan, for instance, with the incursions by the Israelis in that region as well, and the land grabs. They've been digging trenches for months and months around that region and trying to lay claim on the land in advance of what's happened in the last few days, and the advance towards Damascus by al-Jawani and his despotic crew. So they're going to talk about inclusion, diversity, human rights, freedom. But again, this is going to end up the way of other countries we've seen in the Middle East go, and North Africa. Countries like Libya, absolutely horrific regimes. And this will have knock-on effects into Europe and domestically here in Ireland because of the fallout of this. It's important we stand up for real democracy in all countries, that people stand up and support and have proper rights in their own countries. But also, vitally important here as well, stand up for the people who always suffer and die because of these wars and because of more faction fighting that's going to take place because of what's taken place in the last number of days with a whole lot of different factions across religion bases, across from Christians being persecuted. We've seen churches being burned in areas of Syria, and of course having this regime there is going to impart perhaps what we've seen in Afghanistan before with the Taliban, where they claimed they were going to be all about inclusion and human rights, but of course we've seen that completely being disregarded. So we'll wait and see how this develops. But again, it just shows you Ireland, the response by the political establishment here have been the usual bow down to their masters rather than serving the interests of ordinary people. So thanks a lot for the support of my videos. I'm very grateful. Everybody who's subscribed to my YouTube channel, I'm very grateful. And for anybody who has supported me through various other platforms as well and buy me a coffee, I'm very, very grateful for all your support. So from Dublin, thanks for all the support. Take care. Slán.